Howdy, guys. How we doing? Hello, hello. Um, Come off mute. Come off mute. This is a conversation.
Hi, John.
How we doing?
How are
So,
you?
so tell me about that email last night.
Oh, I could keep on writing.
Did it serve its purpose?
It did.
So I'll let Dean into the conversation here for just a moment. I'm not going to give any details here. But Dean, we've had conversations around pain and pleasure before, haven't we? Right? How we move
Oh,
quicker
yeah.
away from pain than we do towards pleasure. And sometimes when there's those activities that man, for whatever reason, they find a way to elude us, right? And so one of the ways we can look at here, we can either look at how do I decrease the pain of doing the activity or increase the pain of not doing the activity. And usually the increasing the pain of not doing the activity is amplifying the negative impact of not doing the activity. And if we can stay in relationship with that, that tends to go ahead and create some consistent urgency.
Yeah, for sure.
And now, and then I think we touched on this yesterday, but like to be clear about this, right? It's it's that sprint of discipline to get to the habit, to get back into routine, right? Of those things.
Correct.
And so that's what we were touching on there.
Correct.
Care to share any more details on that?
I've already talked to 23 people today.
Woo, man, it's working. All right. So what'd you do? What was the email? Care to share?
No. It was rough, right? Writing it out was rough, and looking back at it was like, clearly I have issues. So it's like, why am I doing this to myself? And when I got here, I just started in working. And really the phone calls were easy, right? I picked the easy ones first. I called everybody that came to my client event to say thank you. And they had all received a lottery ticket. So I wanted to know if they won. Yeah, so it's been kind of fun.
So that's fine. The $1 billion lottery ticket.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was only a scratch off.
I like
I
it.
would have known if they won the $1 billion one.
Little sidebar. There's an agent in our office that's what she does. Like it actually started out anything over 300 million, she would send out, and she's had to raise it to $1 billion now.
Yeah, right.
Cool little giveaway though, because she's got folks that will ask her like at the closing, so did I make the list now? Do I make them? So to kind of give you some insight here, Dean, is that you know how people have dream boards? Well, there's a conversation of, okay, if we didn't do activities that we were supposed to be doing with consistency, what would happen in our world? How would that make us feel, et cetera? Like going deep into that, right? And so the concept got honestly somewhat organically, what would a nightmare board look like? And you know what you just taught me right there, Linda, is that all it's designed to do is create perspective.
Right.
Right. There's a gentleman that in a previous role was a police officer. He's like, John, here's the thing. Every day I went to work, people shot at me. I can do this.
Right.
Right. Just perspective.
Yep.
All right, guys. So we're here to talk about some things that are happening out there. And you know, I kind of set up the conversation. So last week, Dean, you had a chance to be a part of the conversation. And it was kind of one of just kind of laying the groundwork for really ultimately what I'm saying here is building a growth plan around this area of our business.
Yeah.
You know, and as I was kind of preparing for our conversation today, in its simplistic format, where we probably want to go ahead and just bring attention to with consistency is on a mindset piece, stay consistent there, a mechanical piece, and then just swap ideas around best practices. Right. And I'm willing to have this conversation with whatever cadence or frequency that we think that is appropriate. I think right now it makes sense to have it a little more consistent than maybe over the, you know, 3 months from now or what have you. I don't know that it needs to be the conversation every day, but I think it's definitely worth having some dialogue around, right? Because ambiguity inspires anxiety, and so those that aren't having an offensive mindset, they're going to be vulnerable to some of that anxiety that could build around, okay, oh my gosh, what do I say at a buyer consultation now? Being totally transparent with you, I mean, 20 years in the industry, I would say I've spent more idle thought around what that buyer consultation looks like the last 2 weeks than the last 20 years.
Same. I mean, I'm 11 years in, same. Like I told you last week, John, I don't really have a formatted buyer's presentation, and that's something I need to get my arms around.
Yep, and I think we're gonna be chip away at that a little bit here today. Okay. Okay, so first off with the mindset here, right? So we talked a little bit about this last week. I think Mark Willis did a great job setting this up, and I could see this basically being a foundational piece of just how we open up the dialogue. Is that when we change, when we incur change, we tend to go ahead and have tunnel vision and focus on the things that we might be leaving behind, right? What's in the rearview mirror, right? However, my good friend Jelly Roll would say that there's a reason that we look in the windshield's bigger, right? And so let's look at where we're going versus what we're leaving behind, right? Um, and honestly, guys, even before creating that little metaphor, or whatever, I'm excited about this. I'm so excited about this, right? And I would tell you point blank, maybe not in this setting, but I would tell you point blank, if you weren't in the pole position for this change. Thing is, you guys are. Right? You guys, and the reason I know that is because of the intentionality you bring to the listing side, right? All we have to do is change some semantics on the buyer side. The folks that I think are going to have and the other thing I know is that you guys are all positioning yourself as fiduciaries, and that's a major conversation for today. I believe that the functionaries are going to get washed out. And I have a sneaking suspicion most all of us on the call are pretty excited about that when that shows up. So the functionaries I think are going to be out the door, and I think that the biggest challenge there is going to be for those people that don't fully understand the fiduciary opportunities and what that looks like to truly represent a client. Before going into some of the mechanical stuff, one of the things here about the mindset. So that this was are you guys familiar with the what if game? Has ever heard about this? Okay, so this was actually shared with us from a chief imagination officer. Pretty cool, right? I want to be that. And so that's what Disney has, right? And so and Disney, what they'll do with their group, and I don't know the cadence to this, but from some time to time, they'll just have the what if game, right? And so the context that the chief imagination officer, what he shared with us is like, Netflix did this, right? They had the what if game. What if there weren't any late fees? What if we didn't have to go anywhere to rent a movie, right? And it's just there, it's just designed to go ahead and inspire more creativity, right? So what if we treated buyers more like sellers and sought to list them as soon as possible?
It's a good way to think, I haven't heard it presented that way, but that's good.
Right. And what's going to happen here is that that's going to start creating these other areas here. What client servicing needs would that need to, what would be created? What would that role start to look like? Would that look differently than what we've seen as a buyer's agent's role before in previous years?
I think more hands-on, just you know, just so they know our value, not that we're not hands-on, but I think we got to be a little more diligent in keeping in more regular contact with them so they know that we got their back and that we're worth what we're charging if they're the ones that are paying. So that's my first thought.
So I would agree 100%, right? So now if you look at that role as if we treated buyers like sellers, right? That listing agent, that listing specialist that's operating at a 10, they've mastered it. How many listing consultations a day or a week do you think they're going on? Like if they're mastering it, they're up there at mega camp, they're preaching to the audience of 10, 15,000. If they're up there, how many appointments a week do you think they're going on?
I don't know. My first thought is one a day, but it's probably more than that.
Yeah, it could be one day, it could be 2 a day, right? Right. So now I gotta ask you, man, how many of us are there? Like, I mean, are there multiple yous, Dean?
Right, right. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm still looking for that, right? So if I'm gonna go on multiple listing consultations for buyers, right, that's gonna then create a whole other tsunami of client servicing needs that it's gonna create, right? And I'm probably gonna get into a relationship with these buyers earlier on in the process. So now I'm spending more time with them too, or the organization is, right? So that's gonna require something start showing up in my world. I might need to have some leverage, right? So now that leverage might not necessarily be a buyer's agent because I've already gained commitment after the consultation. But it might be more than what a showing agent has historically done too. This is an interesting kind of dynamic to look at. What would that role look like? What is that role worth? Right? What would that leverage look like and what would it be worth? Right. So some conversation that showed up here with another client, she said, I've already had I've worked with showing agents, stuff like that. What do you see as being customary? So I'll share, here's what I'll typically see, transactional base of X amount of dollars per showing, stuff like that. So, well, I typically have them do more. Like pretty much I gain commitment from them, and then from there, like they run with it. Doesn't that sound like a lot like what might be likely in a scenario if that agent's going to treat buyers like sellers and have multiple listing consultations a week, if not a day? Wouldn't we need some sort of leverage for somebody to go ahead and take them from after gaining commitment to getting under contract, or at least to getting to a point of writing an offer? Probably a little bit more
Yeah.
than just a typical showing, right? So they have to be more involved with it. So what is that worth? So the reality is that question can't truly be answered until we get clear about what the expectations of the role is. Would you guys agree with that? So that's just some thought process there. I'm just posing these questions out there, just to put some thought around, right, as we continue to grow. Thoughts, questions, concerns, excitements?
No, and I remember last week on the call, John, you mentioned that stat, which I was never familiar with, that, did I hear it from you? I can't remember. I've been all over this the last week, but, when you have a concerted buyer consultation, the time spent in finding I think the average showings go from like 11 to like 3 when you sit down and you actually have a consultation with them, something like that. Did I hear that? Was that on our call last week? I'm sorry, it might have been
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Okay, so that what we were referencing there, we were referencing that one of the clients that we work with, they track everything, almost like at like forensic audit level, right? And so what ended up happening here is that they've got a really large team, so they're trying to figure out what's the value we bring to the team, right? How do we go ahead and make our team members' lives easier, those sorts of things. So they're tracking when agents would plug into the systems and models, i.e. the buyer consultation, and they would have their clients go to buyer consultations, how many showings did they have there, right? How many showings on average? And then for the agents that didn't go ahead and have their clients go to a buyer consultation, how many showings did they have? So it kind of depends on when you catch her, right? But it's somewhere between 10 and 11 showings per client if they don't go to a buyer consultation, right? If they do go to a buyer consultation, then it's a little over 3, an average of 3, right? So the difference there is about 8, let's just say 8 different showings. Now the same team, they did kind of an informal survey / mastermind. They said, all right, hey, well, how long is it going to take us, or for that matter, the client, is it going to take for each showing? And so they took into account all the things that people in my family don't take into account when we're trying to be timely. But I digress. That we've got to prepare, right? So I've got to put clothes on, shoes on, right? I've got to go ahead and travel. I've got to go ahead and walk the property when I'm there, right? I'm probably gonna have some conversation there, and then I'm going to leave. I'm going to drive home, right? And so they kind of came up with roughly about an hour and 45 minutes with all that. Oh, by the way, they put idle thought in there too. So I'm just going to round it up and say 2 hours. So the way that they are now articulating their value is they're quantifying the benefit, which I'm gonna give you that framework that we talked about last week here in a moment. So they're quantifying the value that they're bringing, or the benefits and the value that they're bringing to their client. So in that scenario, they're able to say, we save you time, right? So 8 showings times 2 hours would be 16 hours. So the way that they're conveying it is that the systems and the ideas and strategies that we deploy on average save our clients 2 working days. Right. And then the next step would be to create emotional attachment to it. What would you do with those 2 working days? Who would you spend them with? Right? That's fun. What would you guys do? Great. So next time you do that, that's on us, right? So, the first concepts here to give you framework around that is, okay, what are the features we're offering? What are the tasks that we do, right? And then what are the benefits that our clients get from that, right? So is it time, opportunity, money, stress? How is it impacting them in a positive way? And then the next step is to quantify that, right? Kind of leveling up on the level of mastery here as we articulate it. Right. And then the next one is, how do I go ahead and attach an emotion, create an emotional attachment to the benefit and the prospective client. So if I'm doing that, I'm doing a pretty good job of articulating my value, right? Any questions? I kind of brushed over that really quick because we have kind of had a deep conversation around that. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, excitements there?
No, I just remember hearing that last week, and I never realized that. So it made me realize that, uh, I need to spend more time doing that. I don't, and especially in light of what's happening here. So that's significant, a significant difference in from their, studies. You said they tracked it, so and, it's definitely valid.
Yeah, there's the 4 major decisions that I'm seeing the most offensive people that are really running at this, right? Really, really running at. The first one is kind of what we touched on at the top of the call, is that they're taking on a mindset like these are now listings. So like there's no differential between buyer and seller, they're listings.
I
And
loved the way you said that because it kind of separates your shoppers from your buyers too.
so that honestly, that's one of the major things. So I love that, right? So that's actually the major conversation we're having in that dialogue, right? So if I'm not going to spend 6 months with somebody instead of 2 months with somebody, I got to make sure that it's 6 months with the right somebody. And when they're talking about a growth plan, so now you're perfectly teed up this conversation, right? So like the next step that I'm seeing people kind of naturally gravitate, I'm just trying to like label it so we can kind of like scale it, right? And so the next step that I'm seeing people do is that they're building out a growth plan, right? And so then Gary is shoving this thing down our throats here, the functionary versus fiduciary, for good reason, right? And so then what I'm naturally seeing is that they're using this slide right here as a path for their growth plan, right? So when you look at the fiduciary versus functionary, right? Like I'm not going to read this stuff to you. I'm guessing you can see it. If you can't, just tell me you can't. But when you look at it, the very first thing, it says shallow relationship versus deep relationship, right? So how do I get a deep relationship? Do I just talk about myself the whole time?
No, you dive in deeper on what they're looking for, just more details on what their needs and wants are.
So the way I could say that then, right, Dean, is that I'm going to be asking a lot of questions over here.
Good point. Yeah. So I think they like to hear that, that you really have an interest in really wanting to know as much as possible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, what's that adage, right? People don't care about what you know until they know about how much you care, kind of a situation, right?
Yeah, that's good.
So this is further amplifying the importance of adopting great questions, right? If I'm going to master one skill set, if I got, what Phil Jones would say, the critical moment is, what are those moments that are indexed for influence? Well, if I want to look at a skill set that's indexed for influence, it's going to be asking great questions, and even deeper than that, asking great questions about their motivation, right? And this is getting amplified, right? Remember, when we pressurize systems, we optimize systems. These are all new systems in our industry. So that's one of the next decisions these agents are making. They're saying, all right, hey, here, I'm going to go, rather than sit here and tinker it out and all that sort of thing, I'm going to pressurize it. Right? If my intention was each agent is going to have one buyer consultation a week, they're having 3 now. And by the way, I should share with you, they're not overly technical or overboard with qualifying it. Right? At this point, they're like, we all find a lot of value in the experience itself, right? That'll change, right? Right? And it's already changing, by the way, right? Just like you'd have a pre-listing consultation, right? So you'd have a series of questions before I come over to the house and list the house, right? They're now having a pre-listing consultation for the buy side. Right. And it's all entrepreneurial. Like you guys might be asking, well, what does it look like? They don't have it either, right? They just know that they're asking questions. Right. But to me, this is a really, really big deal, right? So this is a perfect roadmap, if you will, for building a growth plan. All right, deep relationship. How do I get in a relationship? Ask questions. Questions about what? Well, first thing, what are you trying to accomplish? Because you gotta remember, guys, leadership, right? Leadership is nothing more than influence. And people will only do what they want to do, right? If they do what we want them to do, it's only because it's a byproduct of what they want to do. So it's absolutely imperative that we find alignment. And I can't find alignment if I'm not clear about what they want and what I want. Now, as you guys kind of look at, well, here, what are my thoughts? Anything else you want to advance there? Anything coming to mind?
No, nothing, John, right now.
Okay. So now as you're kind of going through the functionary versus the fiduciary, right? So shallow relationship, deep relationship. And then we kind of keep going further on. Which other areas kind of strike you? Accepts most responsibility, interprets and advises data and information, anticipates needs, focuses on outcomes, educates and guides, irreplaceable, highly paid.
Well, the highly paid's nice, but the educates and guides, I mean, people obviously love it when you have a vested interest in their wants and needs and motivation, and this is an opportunity to ramp that up. So that's what stood out to me as well. And then also the anticipating needs and focus on outcomes, but I think those are all part of that.
Okay. So I love how you went right down to number 6 there, educates and guides. So does it say educate and be the hero, or does it say educate and guide?
Well, guide, but if you guide based on the questions that you're asking and you have a real clear sense of what they're looking for and why, you're going to guide them and probably end up being a hero because you're going to help them find a great place. But the point is, you're really drilling down. I mean, you're taking more time to find out what they want and why.
So
That's that.
totally agree with that, right? So what would you see the difference in this scenario, in this context? What's the difference between a guide and a hero?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, does a guide or the hero take the credit, or and the guide doesn't really care? I don't know. It's a good question. I'm thinking out loud there.
Well, when you look at functionary, I think tells themselves would tell you about a lot about what a hero would do in that scenario.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the guy, so really the way that I would interpret this is it's giving context, right? Perspective. I can't change someone's mind, but I can offer them perspective and say, all right, hey, I can respect the lens you're looking through, right? I respect the way you see life. However, are you open-minded enough to look through another lens? Okay, try looking through this lens. Now, do you see anything different there? Right? Considering that, what's the next right step for you and your family? Right. So it's just authoring the solution, right?
Yeah.
So Gary's talking about putting this slide in the consultation. How would you use this slide in a consultation with prospective clients?
Well, that's pretty cool. I never thought of that, but I think I absolutely would put it in there because this clearly distinguishes between, you know, an agent that's gonna have your back versus an agent that's just gonna, you know, throw listings on the wall and see what sticks. And I think for a buyer to be able to see this, they're gonna realize, yeah, okay, that's, you know, if you're presenting yourself as a fiduciary agent, this clearly it points out why and what you're gonna do.
Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things to consider, like going back to the guide, right? Right, it might be, uh, so I don't know about you guys, but like, and, you know, fiduciary and functionary has been kind of thrown around in our industry for some time now. But I don't know that, like, I don't know if I sat down with, I don't know, my family and said, hey, do you know the difference between a functionary and a fiduciary? I'm not convinced that they'd be like, yeah, I gotcha.
John, that's true, because if you asked me this last week, I would have no idea. Like, I don't know you know, I didn't really clearly know the difference between both, and this explains it. This was, this was awesome when I saw this last week.
Yeah, so I'm really, so I think the first thing here is that let's educate. Hey, here's what a fiduciary, and some of the best ways to do this is through kind of metaphors or different things that they already know, right? So, you know, how could we help them? How can we help educate the difference between a fiduciary and functional without even talking about real estate?
We show how we operate, you know, how we do business, and you know why we're the, you know, the person that's going to serve them the best, because we take that responsibility seriously,
Yep.
regardless of industry. You know, we just happen to be realtors, but we're gonna really go to bat for them.
So, I'd agree with you on this, right? And so, you guys haven't noticed, I've really started to enjoy having some fun with good old Chat GPT. So kind of fire that up here and ask the difference. What's the difference between a fiduciary and a functionary, right? And so here's what Chat GPT said. Which, by the way, we might even want to say, you know, how familiar are you with the difference between a fiduciary and a functionary? Well, I want to start there. What type of programming do we have behind it, right? And so the way that ChatGPT would describe it, fiduciary refers to an individual or organization that acts on behalf of another person or persons to manage assets. A fiduciary has a legal and ethical obligation to act in the other party's best interest. This duty, known as a fiduciary duty, is the highest standard of care in equity or law. Fiduciary refers to an individual or organization that acts on behalf of another person or persons to manage assets. Functionaries, on the other hand, typically refer to a person who performs a particular role or function within an organization, often of a clerical or administrative nature. The term does not inherently carry the same legal or ethical obligations as a fiduciary role. What professional examples could you offer as a fiduciary role? What professional examples would handle a person's assets, manage a person's assets?
Oh, like a financial planner? Is that what you mean? That those types of folks? You know,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
So then what, based on the description here, right? What would be a functionary role? What's an example of a functionary role?
Uh, just someone who works at a bank and you go to withdraw or put in money and they hand you your receipt afterward.
I like that, right? So basically your teller, right? So there's a bank teller and then there's a financial advisor, right? Let's say, and actually they literally are, there's a term in that arena, fiduciary, right? So Linda, you're going to share something?
No, I was gonna say the bank teller.
Yeah, so like you created a perfect canvas here, Dean, for a great question that is kind of a shoe-in for like, yeah, of course I want a fiduciary, right? So okay, hey, so you got a financial advisor here that has all these legal and ethical they're bound to these legal and ethical duties, right? And they've got context, they've got background knowledge, right? They're skilled and be able to interpret the information for you. And then you've got a bank teller, right? They're going to go ahead and you're going to give them the bank slip. You're going to tell them, here's what the deposit is, and then they're going to give you the receipt. Which one of those individuals do you want guiding you through building out your retirement plan?
Well, the planner, and your biggest financial decision you ever make in your life involves buying a house, so that's a great comparison, actually. you know
You made the canvas, right? So what we just did there is we educated and then asked question guide, right? So like the logical decision, yeah, of course, I want the person that's a fiduciary. Yeah, okay, this is the same thing.
and I mean, fiduciary, it's a big word. So being able to break it down and explain, because I bet you 90% of people don't know what it is. I didn't clearly know what it was a week ago. I'll admit that, but now I do. But you mentioned some things about some nice kind of buzz phrases. High standard of care, legal and ethical duties. And that kind of reminded me of some of the like the high standard of care, like the stuff we learn with the luxury stuff, like providing that concierge type service. And so again, these are great thoughts as we develop this.
Well, not, and if you think about it here, one of the things that Gary shared was that he said the people that are going to have the most success, actually, the question came up, how do you best take advantage of some of the change, right? And he said, go be the light, moths go to the light. Understand the business better and be able to explain it simpler. Think about what you guys just did about saying, all right, bank teller or financial advisor, right? We could have gone through this and, 1 through 8, here's the difference, here's the difference, here's the difference, here's the difference, here's the difference. And we could have put the people to sleep.
Yep.
Or we can share, hey, you're familiar, you've had this happen before, yeah? Have you ever used bank teller? Yeah, it's cool. Did they advise you on what to do with your retirement account? No, they didn't. All right, gotcha. But if you work with a financial advisor, sure, okay. And I'm guessing actually, they have to have a consultation on an annual basis. So I'm guessing you've had a consultation with them, right? And they're curating that for you, right? Because you got a different definition of success than others around you, right? Different resources. So they're curating, right? Yeah. We're a lot like that.
This helps us answer the question of why use a buyer's agent.
Yes, yes,
I mean,
yes.
it's kind of right. You just lay it out here like this. This is why you're signing a buyer listing with me. This is what we do for you. I mean, it clears it up.
Well, I think a lot of it, I'd agree with that at a high level, right? Conceptually, 100%, right? And then what I'm going to look at here is I need to understand the behavioral style across from me. If I got a high I, they don't want to hear any more than just bank teller and financial advisor. They're going to get it.
Right.
Thank you. Please stop talking, right? High D, even less, right? High C, they're going to want to know. No, tell me more about that. What exactly is the financial advisor going to do for me? Okay, so I'm going to be prepared for the C, right? I love there's one of the guys, Tucker Reinhardt, he talks about anytime he's really into the DISC assessment. And so he was talking about whenever he prepares for a listing consultation, he always prepares for a C. Why?
They want the most detail.
Right? So he's gonna be prepared for that, right? So he's not kind of caught from behind with that. But he knows that when he gets together with them, by the way, this is a little tricky, guys. I like this a lot. He will always ask it. He'll look for some sort of family related item or picture. And he will specifically ask about the picture. Like, oh, hey, that's a pretty cool picture of you and the family. Where were you guys at? Right. And he like clearly says like Cancun or whatever. Right. And he knows if they spend time on that picture, what would that suggest? What behavioral style? So if they
It
elaborate,
depends on what they tell you.
I like that.
If it's like, oh, I went with all the family, we had such a good time, we saw this, and this, it might be an I. Or if they go into detail, we went to Cancun, last March, the 3rd week of March in whatever year, and then I'm thinking C. But
I like that. Yeah. Tucker just had his simple thought was, all right, hey, if they tell me more and more, if they stay on the family conversation for a minute or two, right, that's going to tell me that they're somewhere in that IS kind of range, right? If they go ahead and they split back over like, all right, yeah, we were in Cancun last year, it was great. So tell me about what you charge. What do you think my house is worth, right? That's moving more to DC, task oriented, right? By the way, he's just looking for, are they warm there or are they cold there? Right? Cold's gonna be DC, warm's gonna be IS, right? Guys, what are you thinking here?
Well, I love this, just adds more fuel to the fire in terms of preparing better on these buyer presentations. And like you said earlier, the key thing was like, you treat these like listings. I'd never thought of it that way either. So just kind of got some momentum here, gathering information, trying to figure out the best way to approach this. But I love this functionary versus fiduciary, and again, showing people this and explaining the difference. I just think it's good. I think it's great.
You bet, man. Joe, I see in the chat, you said, all right, can you share with me? I actually might have sent an email. Can you share with me the slide, the functionary versus fiduciary? It is in the value squared packet. And so that's where you can find it there. I'll be happy to share. This is literally just a screenshot from our Thursday conversation with Gary. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And one of the, I'll share with you a couple best practices here, and then we can kind of keep building off of this as we go. So one of the best practices, we shared this last week, and we took this from Phil Jones and a couple other agents that the first question that might be coming up here, and we might be building a mountain out of a molehill, and then it might not be happening as frequently as in our head it is. But that question in passing, actually, Linda, we talked about this too. That question in passing of, all right, hey, what's going on with this whole NAR thing? By the way, did you even get that at the event?
No.
Interesting, right?
Right.
Right. But even if I'm not going to get the question right, if I'm on my heels, that might go and erode my confidence, which might make me a little less assertive. Or if I'm prepared for it, that's going to enhance my confidence. So a simple way to really answer that, right? Hey, what's going on in the whole NAR stuff? Like, what do you think about it? Phil Jones, if he was here, I'm pretty convinced he would suggest, guys, just create a curiosity gap, and something like that would be, man, it's creating a lot of opportunity for us.
Yeah.
Right? Vague answer designed to elicit another clarifying question, right? For those that say, hey, I'm not going anywhere, this guy, right? Like, it's done, right? They don't care, or I don't have a relationship with them, either one. And then the second thing here is that if they do ask, then it's a matter of, okay, what do you mean by that opportunity? How would you guys answer that right now on the spot? What type of opportunities are showing up?
Well, you're gonna again, you're gonna, this whole fiduciary thing, and the fact that you want a buyer agent to represent you, it's in your best interest. And I know you shared some other things last week, like those 109 tasks or whatever. But in terms of a quick conversation, I don't know, like a quick answer to that, but just showing that the difference between an agent that's going to be to your advantage versus one that's not.
Well, so like a simple way to put that is, hey, it's creating great opportunities for us to get together with folks so we can go ahead and share with them what great representation looks like and so what subpar representation looks like.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, guys, one of the reasons that I'm going to encourage you guys, whether it's this is a medium or other mediums, to stay in these conversations over the course of time, is because what Gary said is to know the business better. That's the area I feel very confident about. It's how do I go ahead and convey it in a simpler, right? And what's kind of interesting, I reflect on when you ask somebody who's 20 years old what the purpose of life is, right? And then you ask somebody who's 90 years old what the purpose of life is, you get different answers, don't you? Which answers longer?
Well, probably the younger one. I mean, because they're not really sure. My hunch.
That's been my observation too. My observation is that you ask somebody that's, an assisted facility or something like that, it's a one word, love, happiness, right?
Yeah.
You ask the 20-year-old, well, I mean, it's about, serving and making sure that wherever I leave is better than when I got there, or blah, blah, blah. All good, noble stuff, right? I mean, Same thing. How do I get more simple, right? I'd be around this conversation more. The 90-year-old's been around that conversation a minute, right? So here's a couple things, guys. One, it's different ideas for you to go ahead and put into play, right? So it's one thing to just hang out and kind of have some fun with it. Happy to do that. Another thing to go ahead and kind of learn to earn, right? So first one, can't stress this enough. Just like we'd have a gratitude journal, I would highly encourage us to consider having an opportunity journal. What are the opportunities showing up, right? What's going to happen there is it's going to go ahead and sharpen the axe and what you'll see a lot of people call one of those super skills of reframing. It has us looking for those opportunities. I mean, there's probably not a better way to maintain an offensive mindset than that. Second one I'd consider is putting a growth plan together. The whole purpose of it is what we just talked about there, understanding the business better and informing people in a more simple fashion. And if it were me, I'd use the functionary versus fiduciary as a roadmap for my growth plan. Next thing, I'd adopt that same thought process, that mindset of it's the buyers are no different than sellers now. I'm gonna treat them the exact same. Then I'm going to mastering the buyer consultation with that growth plan around the functionary versus fiduciary. I'm going to learn that new math so I can make the most informed business decisions. Right? How many buyer consultations do I need to get to one closing table? What's the time between, on average, between the buyer consultation and the closing? And then I'm going to identify friction at each stage to harness innovation. I want to share this with you. This is a tool I didn't share with you guys last week. And so this is not from this agent isn't in my roster. It was in one of the other coaches' rosters, and she's got an 88 points of turbulence. So she shares this with her people. I think this is brilliant, right? So Rory Vaden was down at a family reunion, and he's a personal branding expert. And one of the things he talked about was make sure you understand what problem you're solving. Right. So that's the first thing. Second thing, he said, go talk about the problem a lot. Honestly, I was a little surprised by that. Right. But what he's found is that when you talk about the problem a lot, people tend to assume you know what the solution is. He's the expert. I'm going to defer to him, right? Counterintuitive in my mind, but I like it. And so, and then it's a matter of actually having the solutions, right? So if I can understand where the turbulence is and I start amplifying that and I started making offerings, right? The other thing I thought was really cool about Rory, he inspires he tries to get all of his clients to go ahead and share everything, right? The caveat, right? What I mean by that is like, let's say, like Ed Milet, I think Lewis Howes, Ed Milet, they're all those guys are clients of his. And so he's all about like, go convey everything, right? Go share everything. The caveat is don't necessarily put it in chronological order, right? Have it totally disorganized. Because what people pay for, and this is a big aha, guys, big takeaway. What people pay for is not information. That's why AI is not going to take your job. What they go ahead and pay for is contextual information. When AI gets there, now we got some challenges. So then that might be the next step of personal branding. Hey, I'm going to talk about all the problems that buyers are having out there. Here's all the random ideas and strategies. Right. So all of those are different action items that I might be considering here. What takeaways you guys got?
I mean, I love that whole fiduciary versus functionary explaining, but again, less is more to really trying to develop a presentation.
We're at Midland Place in Brookfield. This is Joseph from Keller.
I'm sorry, say it again. Dean?
Just, that the first part, the fiduciary versus functionary, and explaining that, and again, like what Gary says in a simple way, like just you know, well, just really trying to come up with something impactful to show them, and like what the whole thing you just talked about, the 20-year-old versus a 90-year-old. I mean, that's great. I mean, an agent with wisdom doesn't even have to be experienced, but that knows the business and has educated themselves is going to be able to offer their value in a succinct way versus someone that doesn't, is not working on this, and that, again, this is a prime opportunity for agents for the cream to rise to the top, because we're going to have a lot of fallout with agents, leaving the business. I already see it all the time, and I read it online on some of these Facebook groups, like, oh, the buyer agent's dead, this and that, and real estate's over, and that's not true at all. So again, that's that offensive mindset, but and I believe it 100%. So
Yeah, I agree, guys. What I'm learning through the process here is sometimes the simplest way to convey things are through metaphors and analogies. So because I think what you're going to see here, and kind of, I'll use something you just touched on there, Dane, like you see this, whether it's social media or just mastermind, stuff like that. You'll see people just like, okay, what's the difference between a functionary and a fiduciary? And you're like, right? And so like in a mastermind session, like I think that's good to air it out and stuff like that. But like, do I want to hear, if I'm a client or a customer, do I want to hear that explanation? I don't think so. Right, so we've got to get really good with those metaphors, analogies, right? Which means we've got to get context of understanding ourselves. What's the difference between a fiduciary and a functionary? And then look for other places in life where that's shown up that they're already, yeah, that makes sense, right? That's what I do in that context. Why wouldn't I do it over here? Cool. Guys, I'll tell you what, as I keep getting information from other agents and stuff like that, I'll just act as a repository and kind of just convey for you guys. And so this is where I'm just going to kind of, like I said, I'm just going to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of what type of frequency, right? And that sort of thing, because I want to make sure that the conversations actually have good content to take away that we can act on. Cool.
great, John. Thank you.
And by the way, if there's things that you want to go ahead and like specific questions around this, let me know. I mean, my ears are perked right now, and so you can definitely put your fingerprint on what type of material we cover.
Perfect.
Cool.
Great, John. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Make it a great week.
You.
Take care.
See you later.
Bye, guys.